Today we're going to be looking at emotional triggers. What are they and how do we identify them? All of us have emotions and all of us have had and will continue to have experiences which trigger those same emotions. The difficulty is that it's not always apparent what those triggers are or what the underlying meaning is. Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Dr. Jamie Barnier, a clinical psychologist who for the past 15 years has been helping people create deep and lasting change. And on this channel, I share some of what I've learned along the way. Now let's get into it. A client came to me some years ago seeking help for suicidal thoughts and said, well, there's no reason for it. They just come out of nowhere. And that's not true. There's always a reason why we experience anxiety or any other intense emotion. It's our body's way of communicating to us that something needs attending to. In the same way, when one of the warning lights in my car goes off, it's a sign that something internally needs addressing. Today, I want to be able to provide a template for being able to identify your emotional triggers that's based off of the work of Sue Johnson and her work, Emotionally Focused Therapy. All of our minds have an ability to filter difficult emotional experiences. And if that happens, we don't get to process those events completely. We hold on to them in some way, even if we're not consciously aware of doing so. When something happens to remind us of that experience, even at an unconscious level, we become triggered. We might become anxious, dysregulated, or shut down. When that happens, it can be really helpful to mentally reconstruct the event and to see if you can identify the trigger. In therapy, when I'm doing this work with clients, one of the things that may start to happen is that they might diversify or move on to another example before we've been able to identify what the trigger actually is. They might speculate about what they think happened rather than what actually happened, or they might become vague and nondescript. There's a saying that the devil is in the detail, and quite often I find that the trigger is in the detail. We want to stay with the event and make sure that we're not exiting prematurely. If I'm in session with a client, I might say something like, imagine that I'm a fly on the wall and I'm witness to what had just happened. Tell me what happened next. What did you say? How did she respond? And then what happened? And then what happened? Until we get to the very end of the scene. So if you're doing this work on your own, I want you to play the scene back over in your mind. And once you reach the very end of the example that you're working through, go back and identify when was the moment that the anxiety or the emotion was at its most intense. And what happened just before that? That is the trigger. And from here, we want to be able to look at 3 different areas. The first is what happens in our body. So did your face turn red? Did you get sick to your stomach? Did your heart start to race? Did you get a sinking feeling inside? If so, where? Did your eyes start to water? Did you experience heat or adrenaline? Or was there a numbness, a disconnect, or a shutting down that went on? Now, our bodies provide such a rich source of information for us. It's really the first point of awareness, and we can't filter what happens in our body. Second, we want to look at meaning creation. That's the story that we tell ourselves. What do you tell yourself in those moments when you're experiencing all of that going on inside you? Take your time with this one. These thoughts may not be at the forefront of your mind, and it may not be so easy to identify them. It might be something like, this is all too much for me. I can't handle this. If I cry, I won't ever stop crying. She's going to leave me. They're going to reject me. They're going to see what a failure I am. There could be several of these thoughts, so take notes which of these has the most weight behind it. Third, what are the behavioral patterns that you fall into in the face of these triggers? So when you're feeling all of that anxiety on the inside, how do you manage that? What do you do? Do you try to provoke any kind of response from the other person, even if it's a negative response, just so that they'll notice you and that you won't have to feel invisible or insignificant to them? Do you leave for a period of time? Do you withdraw or go silent because it feels like you're failing them in some way? Do you binge eat, exercise, gamble, drink, use drugs or medication because things feel too overwhelming on the inside? Time and time again, I have found that if there is sufficient awareness across each of these areas, trigger, bodily sensation, meaning creation, and action tendencies, people become much more aware of their cycles and patterns, and what was once unknown becomes known and therefore open to change. Do see if you can apply this to a recent example in your life, if you can identify the emotional trigger. And if you do, I'd love to know how you went with that. Feel free to share this with anyone in your life who you think might benefit from the information. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.